Hello everybody, let's talk about some Armored Core 6. Now, I don't know how many of you have been following me recently, or how many of you might have come from to this review, or to my channel, just from this review, but I had played Armored Core 6 for the first 3 days of its launch. Basically, only that game. I played a couple other games a few hours after I completed my streams, but that's besides my point. I played the game for about 72 hours within the first 3 days of its launch, give or take. And even now, sitting where I'm at, I still wanted to do more for the game, so I decided to make my thoughts and everything my review for the game. I'm going to go over everything from AC design to graphics to gameplay to boss design to story, and a few things in between, such as mid-mission mechanics and anything else I find interesting. So let's start off with the basics here. The AC design is one of the core mechanics of the game, of course, but and of any of the Armored Core games, of course, but I think it really is special. Now, I know that's stupid of me to say because it's the whole fucking point of the game, but let me cook here for a second. The collection of parts is so varied and so wide, and there are so many different ways to play the game with all of the different parts. I think it really adds a lot to replayability. And replayability is something that is huge to a game. And because the ACs are so different, no matter how many times you beat the game, no matter how many times you complete a mission, you always want to come back and tweak your AC. Saying this, I am aware that I played I think 2/3 of the game with exactly the same AC. I played it with the highest health I could get, which means I had the tracks on the entire fucking game, and I dual-wielded miniguns as soon as I got my hands on them. And as soon as I got my hands on those, I immediately bought Mobile Weapons Bay, which allowed me to store 2 cannons on my back. So I'm very well aware I played the entire fucking game with the same AC, and didn't change a goddamn thing. Again, let me cook here for a second. Because of the wide variety of the AC parts, and the such huge variety in play styles, and the fact that not only do you have the tetrapods and the tracks being slower but higher health, bigger load capacity, allowing you to use bigger weapons and more bigger weapons with your mobile weapons bay, to the tetrapod being what I would consider probably the hover sniper class, where you can hover into the air and shoot from range. I don't like the tetrapod stuff as much. I didn't touch it as much. But not just that, there are the bipedal standpoints, and there's not just one bipedal, there's 2. You have the forward and the backward facing leg joints, knee joints. One made you walk normally, one made you jump really fucking high. This is exactly what I mean by there's such a huge variety. They didn't just think about all of the different weapons and all of their different uses. They thought about the core chips to allow you to lock on, the thrusters to give you more push, the legs, and I know, again, I'm selling the same shit that every other Armored Core game has sold, but that's not my point. Like any other Armored Core, the replayability is mostly there because of the versatility of the AC construction. And the replayability is such a huge role in anything. Let's now talk about the replayability. Because of the versatility of the crafting of the AC, the wide variety of missions, and I'm going to spoil it for everybody, so click away in the next 10 seconds, the multiple different endings. I know the game's been out for about 5 days, so I wanted to, after saying that, for anybody who still doesn't want to hear any more spoilers and are angry at me that I said that, well, I told you to click away firstly, motherfucker, so click away now, because I'm going to be talking about everything. The mission replays are very good, even though there are a couple stale missions here and there, which we'll go over in my boss session, because one of the stale missions, the only really stale mission I talk about, is actually one of my favorite bosses in the entire game. We'll talk about that when we get to it. Even though there are I think probably 3 missions, in my opinion, that were really, really stagnant, stale. You can only play twice, and they're not as enjoyable. The missions are all very replayable. The bosses are challenging the first time through. The second time through, they still provide some challenges. You still are trying to figure it out. If you've gone from playthrough to playthrough, because when you beat the game, You come back to the missions after the tutorial. You can play the game again and continue to get the other endings. So even though you have that, you play through, complete it, and come back and are now trying to basically refine your playthrough. And while you're focused on refining your playthrough, you actually are missing something. The missions are different. There are alternate versions of some of the missions that you'll play through. Some a bit more obvious than others, from varied lines to added lines to different choices. Some were there that I didn't notice until others, like the Swineburn quest, which I'll cover, and the betrayal / changing sides mid-mission thing when I get to that. Because of the large versatility of the AC and the huge change in the playstyles and all of the different missions that you could replay, and the fact that one of the trophies is required to complete all missions in the game, and not only that, to S-rank all of the missions in the game, that's 2 trophies for those of you who can't count. The fact that those are there, even if the replayability wasn't there, I'm sure a lot of people would still play the shit out of the game because of those trophies, and even more than that, people would probably still play the game because it's Armored Core. But again, the replayability is there. There is so much replayability, maybe not as much as I'm accentuating, maybe 6 playthroughs. By that point, you probably have all the parts, all the log hunts, if you bother to go back and replay missions, collect the credits, do all of the arena, do all of the analysis, all of that stuff. By the time you hit probably playthrough 6, you've reached a stagnation point. And by the time you reach playthrough 6, you're probably playing the game for speedrun's sake. Because who in their right mind plays through the game 6 times? If you're going to play through the game, play the missions individually through the replay mission option. Duh. Which, again, speedruns. But there's... I just can't talk enough about this game. I'm going to try my best not to ramble and not to drag this on, because I am doing this all unscripted. This is all genuine, straight from the heart, straight off the brain. 100% my review, unscripted. The AC design and the replayability is phenomenal. The graphics, I'm going to talk about here a little bit. The graphics are beautiful as well. The colors, saturation, I know I'm saying colors, saturation, shut up. I don't mean it's cute, bubbly, pretty. I mean it's grim, grindy, dark, warlike. Absolutely stunning. The beautiful, beautiful sceneries, the landscapes, the missions, all of it are so wonderful. I cannot accentuate that enough. And not only do you have the AC design system and the beautiful replayability missions, you have the training rooms and the arenas to build on, and you get these sceneries that are boss area spaces, kind of like boss areas, into the arena system, and it just adds this nice sense of the game is pretty but grim and grimy, but cool and sci-fi technology focused. The mechas, the simulations, the almost Metal Gear-esque way people talk between each other through comms, and all of that. Now, to further go on from there, I want to talk about, of course, the graphics, because the weapons are beautifully designed. The graphics really accentuate this with bullet trails and the shells flying through the air after you fire. And the flamethrower is, I'm gonna tell you all right now, if you want to get through the game quickly, minigun and flamethrower dual trigger, best combo in the fucking game. I actually just played through the game today to get the footage for this, and I basically beat the game in like less than 3 hours, which my previous personal best was 4 hours and 30-ish minutes on stream. I basically beat the game in 3 hours. Quote beat, because again, when you beat the game, you go back to the mission just after the tutorial, so I guess you can't quite technically consider it beating the game, but my point still stands. The graphics really are accentuated onto the weapons, which I think is such a good focus, because of course it's a warlike game. The landscapes, the villages, everything are very pretty, but the weapons, the graphic design for them just sells it. The laser weapons have the residual trail trailing after. The rockets just feel like rockets, the boosters. the guns, you can see them heat up. It's just there's so much attention to detail in the graphics and all of the different like the fogs, the winter storms when you get to the ice plateau, the setting sun when you're in grid 89 trying to get to the top of the cargo launcher. There is such good attention to detail in the graphics, design, visuals that it's something it would be an injustice to not talk about them. From beautiful scenery like the Xylem City, where even though it almost feels like it's supposed to be repetitive, the buildings still have variations. So when you look at them, you're like, oh, they're the same building copied from the side. They're not. The sides are the same, sure, a little bit, but once you get around to the front, you see lots of differences. Yes, of course, there's probably a lot of copy and paste buildings. Shut up. That's not my point. I'm going to say that a lot. Because of the large variety in the models, the assets, it stands out quite a lot, especially in the current Unreal Engine, where a lot of games just feel like copy and paste. A lot of people hate on people who pay more attention to the graphics in the game, or the gameplay, or the story. I'm not one of those people who cares, because I genuinely think graphics are very important, because, well, I just like graphics. I grew up on Final Fantasy, so of course I love the graphics. And of course I love the story. And the gameplay, and everything. I'm stupid. Don't mind me. But the graphics are so well put together in Unreal Engine because they're so varied up. It's not the same model, it feels pasted over and over again. Even some of the MTs and machines have variations with different weapons and shoulder weapons, different colors. There's the same base model, but they aren't all the same. It's good variation, good model control, to not reuse the same asset too many times. The walker gears that kick you, the punchers that are different colors for the RAD, as to the hyenas, the toy boxes, the drones that change several times. I think there are like 9 different drone variants in the game. I think is the biggest variant of designs for any of the machines in the game. Because there's the gun drone, a missile drone, a laser drone, a large sniper drone, a large sniper energy drone, a large rocket drone, and then a large artillery drone. So there's like 9 different drone variants in the fucking game. And there are like, I think 8 or 7 MT variants. And then there's like 2 tetrapods. The drones are there are so many drones in the game. And I'm saying all this to prove my point. Even though a lot of people dislike the graphics because so many people focus on graphics, the game is bad because the graphics are good, and the game is of course bad because they focus too much on the graphics, but that's not the case here. The game is so beautifully designed, and what I'm thinking is that it's not that the graphics were designed separately from the game. I think the graphics were designed around the game. Now, that's a stupid sounding sentence, I'm aware. But what I mean by that is, instead of it feeling like a lot of the times where the character is a concept out, and then the story is written around them, it feels like the story was written and the character was then made a concept afterwards. Now, I don't know how many people can really understand the craziness behind what I just said, so I guess I'll try to break it down a little more. A lot of games, especially some of the bigger titles nowadays, especially those breaking into Unreal Engine 5 and are focused into Unreal Engine 5, because of the huge asset flips a lot of them are, as they're all basically the same shit over and over and over and over again, they feel like the game had the assets before it had the game. Like the developers had bought the assets and made the models long before they really knew what they were doing, or going to do with the game. Now, I guess this could be a thing where it's, oh, this is just a From Software title, so of course it's like that. They pay attention to everything. And yes, having played through Elden Ring and having played through a few of the Dark Souls games, I agree, it's just a From Software thing. Where they take everything and make it a name. Where the game is designed around the game. That's a fucking stupid sentence, I apologize. But it's so well put together, with the graphics being almost feeling like they were last to the story. Like, the models were the last thing to be put together. Again, I know it's stupid. I'm going to say that a lot during this graphics section because I'm trying to put it into words myself, because it's really hard to put how I feel about the graphics and the way they were designed around the game into words. But there's just so much attention to detail when it comes to the modeling and the graphics of the game that it's just, there's too much for me to talk about. It's too perfect. Not too perfect. It can never be too perfect. It can never be too pretty. The landscapes, the buildings, the trees, even stuff like the fog. I don't know if I've said this already. I'm going to stop because I think I have already. I'm sorry. It's just all so well put together. And it just deserves so much praise, especially someone like me who comes from Final Fantasy, specifically, or for someone like me who comes from Square Enix games, like Final Fantasy, where they're very pretty, very attractive, very appealing games. The lighting is good. I feel like this also pulls me in because of the graphics. Now, of course, I played Armored Core 6, like I've said. I actually have no idea if I've said this yet, because I played it in the past. Or on Armored Core 2, I think, in the past, a long time ago. And even more attention to detail is, unlike a lot of games now where you make all these customizations when it comes to important cutscenes, you have no customizations that you made in the story, but they're not in the cutscenes anymore. It's just good, very good attention. So to summarize, I guess, this quarter up, I'll do one final full summary at the very end. The graphics and the AC design are meshed perfectly. The ACs are beautifully designed and are so versatile that they build upon the replayability, and you want to play again and again just to design a new AC to see the prettier landscapes. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say that the landscapes really aren't that pretty, but you don't pay attention to the finer details, like the variegation in the buildings, the trees, and like I've said, the atmosphere. The music is really a big part of the atmosphere, and I'll talk about the music again because there really isn't too much of it, which I think is really what adds to the game a lot. So because of the way it all meshes together, the lighting, the graphics, the shadings, the AC design, the weapons, and how the graphics are designed so perfectly around the weapons. It's not like they went for super hyper realistic. It still feels a little cartoony but realistic at the same time, but really sci-fi, but anime. It's just very, very well meshed together. Like in Elden Ring, like in Dark Souls, like in Bloodborne. It just all saps together into one very, very nice feeling, graphical and attractive view. So to then break off of the graphics and replayability section, even though the replayability should not have been part of the graphics and design, I apologize. We'll go from replayability and graphics to the story. The story leaves you with so many questions that you want to keep playing. The replayability loop is so big, not just because of the versatile AC designs and the beautiful, stunning graphics, but because of the questions you're left with. You beat the game once, but you don't know everything. You feel like you missed so much, and you're not happy with your choices. I'll talk about each individual ending when we get to the end, I promise. But there's so much you find. When I played through the game for the first time, I did the Climb the Wall quest and found Volta's dead body after the briefing. I knew he was dead, but it was such a good story choice to leave him in there for the people to find. And his lore tablet about how Iguazu went AWOL, even though I really didn't like Iguazu. I liked Volta a lot. It's just... it left you with, why did they get sent out again in a suicide mission, and why am I here? If they couldn't do it, can I do it? And when you do it, you're like, but why am I so different? And then you go further and further on, and you're like, what is the true goal of the corporations? Because there seems to be more, and it's just like, oh, well, they're really only after the coral and the technology, and then what's the Liberation Army really after? And of course, it's again, they just want to save their planet. And you play through these missions and beat the game once, and you come back through, and there are alternate variants of the missions. Like this mission you're seeing in front of me, I don't think has an alternate version in the second playthrough as opposed to the first playthrough. I think you could do this variation that I'm about to show you, and I'll talk about the variations a little bit more. I think a lot of them are only actually available after you beat the game once. When you do the Swineburn mission, and you fight him after sneaking through all of it, which, by the way, was a great idea to have us sneak through it, kind of pseudo sneak through it, because you just blow your fucking happy ass way through it, as long as you don't get spotted by the camera. This section where he pleads for his life. This, where you get to choose. I do believe this was in the first game, or the first playthrough. But there are other missions like this, where in the middle of the mission you're forced with a choice. When you fight with the Guazu and Volta as Gun 13 for the first Red Hound mission under Michigan, where you could choose on playthrough 2 to side with the rebels and attack a Guazu with Volta, or ignore them and continue your mission. Those kind of decisions nail replayability in, because not only did I do that on my second playthrough, no, I didn't do it because I wanted to actually do another industry ending and get the other ending I hadn't got for the two primary endings. But I came back through on the third playthrough and did it, and even on the second playthrough, I noticed new line changes. Like here, on my third playthrough through the game, I found this interaction where I was able to take Swineburn's active proposition. I denied it on stream, but I went back and played it off camera and found this, a third boss, or another boss fight for this mission. And yes, this is why I couldn't find the other combat log for this mission, which, yes, is the reason why I replayed this mission. And to find out that there are secret interactions like this, maybe not as secret, but it's more like I wasn't paying as much attention, just adds so much to the replayability value, and it adds so much to the story because you think you knew everything before you, but you found something new. There is so much, again, attention to detail. So many new lines with each playthrough, so much mystery, so much variation in the story. Even though you beat through the game once, you're like, oh, it'll kind of be the same, but different, right? It'll be me making different mission decisions, and it'll be kind of stale and replayable. I'll know where all the enemies are, and yes, I know where all the enemies are still, but it's different. I noticed new lines. I heard Walter speak in a lighter tone, or refer to me a little better, or Carla disliking me a little bit more, or maybe Air having a different line and siding with me more and giving me more affection, it feels. It's just stuff like that bring in very subtle changes to the game, but still feel like it's the same, but different. That's, again, a stupid statement, but it's just the truth. It feels so the same, yet so different, all at the same fucking time, that it's almost infuriating that I spent those 3 playthroughs playing through it and not having so many questions that got answered and then immediately shoved back into my mouth because I was forced to open with another question. Like, when Air first appeared, I was like, oh, obviously she's going to be, maybe she's someone who was hit by the coral at the same time and were linked to brains and something like that. And then it went on and on and on. And I was like, oh, maybe it's like the Mako stream in Final Fantasy VII Remake. And where it's a consciousness, the life of the world of the thing. And then eventually it goes on, and I'm starting to learn more about Air, and she's not the consciousness of the coral, but actually a Rubiconian that was swept up into the coral and disembodied. And then you keep going on, and you wonder, well, what all is that? Because it feels like it's not all of it. And then Air tells you that it's not just that. She died, or at least I'm kind of putting it together like she says it this way, but it kind of seems like she was implying that she died during the fires of Ibis, which would make sense. And that during that, somehow the coral sucked her up, and she became a floating consciousness amongst the coral. And then you start to put it together like, oh, the coral isn't just a fuel source. It's a biological being, a hive mind in a way. Multiple conscies meshed into one conglomerated all-powerful being, or all omnipotent being. And then you go on and on and on, and you realize it's not just that the coral is one being of, or one mesh of the beings that died, or like the chaos in Final Fantasy 13-3, where it's all of the people who have died and can't be reincarnated. It becomes lost souls, or like in Final Fantasy X, where the souls, if they aren't ascended, they become demons and fiends. It gives me that sort of feel where the coral isn't, and of course they are implying this, so I'm not going to give you the same type of feel. They are implying that the coral is a living, breathing, conscious, mutating creature that is ever replicating like a single-celled organism, ever multiplying and growing at an accentuated rate. And that you start to feel this, is it dangerous, or is it something don't have to worry about? And you're left with so many unanswered questions by the time you get to the end of the game, that you go back and play through it, and you start to notice different things by doing another playthrough. Like, oh, well, in Walter's case, the first ending I got, I had to kill him. And I'll cover that a little bit more when we get to the endings. And I come back through, and he's got different lines, and I was like, but in the first ending I got, you realize that he actually wasn't doing all of this just for him. He wasn't just after it for us. He wanted to get us out of this cycle we're stuck in, because we're an augmented human and we're very fuckered up. He's trying to do all of these missions, trying to get us the credits to break free. And he even says this during the fight. Go on, finish the mission. You've got all the credits you need. Undo the surgery and become free. And you notice these things, and when you play through it again, and you pay attention more now that you've heard this thing at the end of the story, from that perspective, you listen to the character a little more, and think about the meaning behind their words a little more. And you start to wonder again, what all is there to this? There's more than just Mistiyai again. Now I'm left with more questions. And then you go through the game again, and a lot more of your questions are answered, but you're still left with a fair few, and then you finally beat the game on the third time, and you feel like you've understood everything. And maybe, yes, you've put all the puzzle pieces together and kind of start to understand everything, especially if you did it the way I did, where the endings kind of meshed together in a perfect way, where I started to put everything together in a very asymmetrical, perfect thinking, where it made me want to do this review. But you then want to go back and listen, because you've noticed so many new voice lines through all the different endings. You like, what if I play through the replay missions, play the different missions that aren't marked as alternate, or the ones that I didn't do before? Or I haven't done enough to know this, and I'll just sit there and play the mission slowly and listen to all the voice lines and all of the characters talking. And so it gives you this sense of replayability, because you want to know. You want to put the puzzles to piece together. Not only is there these collectibles for hunt logs and machine parts to collect and missions to complete, trophies to gain, but you want to find these data logs that explain the very world you're in. There's data logs you can find across the map, and hidden chests that contain more parts. Like when I first discovered the hidden chests on like the second to last or fourth to last mission, I panicked because like, holy shit, how much loot am I missing? And you're left with the catalogs where they explain stuff, and in one of the catalogs they talk about the fires of Ibis, and you're left like, so really, what is the coral? And I'll talk about that section a little bit more at the end. So the voice acting is also very good. I wish the side characters had a little bit more effort. I feel like some of the people dying could use a little bit more effort, but that's just me. The voice acting, though, is very phenomenal. The actually important characters have very good lines. Snail makes himself out to be an absolutely unlikable character that you just have to get along with because he's so self-centered. Iguazu is an annoying prick who has a huge ego. Volta is just a rationalist who still kind of has an ego, but also doesn't want to acknowledge that, well, he acknowledges that he is him, something different. And then you've got Walter, who you at first think he's doing this all for him, and that when we finish this, he'll set us free, and then you realize during one maybe the end that it's all for you, and you start to question if maybe it was all for you all along, or if it was something that happened due to what happened to him during that ending. and as he speaks out the lines for the fact that you've got all the credits, and he speaks to you, you could really feel like there's emotion behind it. And Carla has such a good character. Like, I think my two favorite characters in the game. I know I was just talking about Carla. My two favorite characters in the game are Air and Michigan, I think. I'm stuck between Michigan and Walter and Carla, all like tied to me. But my number one favorite, of course, is Air, because her voice acting is just absolutely phenomenal. The story, the written story, and the way she talks is like she's narrating her own story separate from everything at the same time. You get to know her and like her and understand her and the Coral more and the Rubiconians, but at the same time, you feel like while she's telling you this stuff, you're hearing her tones, her whispers, her cries, all leading you along another story. The tones are beautifully meshed together, and I might be digging too deep into it, but it just feels very good to hear the voice acting, because a lot of good storytelling is good voice acting. Now, this isn't always the case, as there are plenty of games out there with no voice acting, Hollow Knight, which are very good stories. But at the same time, I'm going to exclude Hollow Knight from that list because it really doesn't have it has a pseudo story. Ender Lilies is something I've been playing, has a good story, and it has no voice acting effects. I did the voice acting for it, which was a blast. It sounds terrible though, but the voice acting is phenomenal. So let's move on to the next subject. Bosses. There are a handful of bosses. No, not even that. There is a pairs of bosses that are a little dumb. The Cleater class, the one you fight in Carla, and the one you fight during one of the endings, and is it Festus? Hermes, something like that, and V2 Snail during the Walter ending, during the Rubicon Liberation Army ending. I'll point out that ending when we get to it and say these endings are the ones that I'm talking about. These two bosses, Cleaner is fine. He's a little annoying, but once you get a hang of him, he is manageable. Hermes is fine. I think it's its name. But the snail fight is so fucking unfun. I hated Pulsar Shield bosses. But Snail, I was stuck on him for like a fucking hour. I hated that fight so much. I wanted to stop playing the game because of that fight. But because I liked the story, the graphics, everything about the game so much, I couldn't stop playing. And I'm going to accentuate this again. Listen to the voice acting during this. And the ambience. The music.
Watch out for friendly fire.
The build-up and the voice acting is so spot on, and then silence. As the rail cannon fires, you hear the boom ring out. It's so good. And that's the reason why this boss fight, I think, might be my favorite boss fight. The mission is stale. This is what I was saying about some of the missions being kind of not fun to replay over and over again. The Ironworm, the Ice Worm mission gets stale very fast. It's very repetitive, it's the same patterns. In fact, you're seeing me play through it basically perfectly, aside from that shot. I could have timed it a little better. But other than that, it's damn near a perfect run. Everything runs on script. So the best part about this mission is the introduction to allies, which was cool to me. Well, not the introduction to allies, the addition of allies that are more than just 2. I had 3 allies in this mission. And it was just the combination of you, a solo mercenary, and all of the corporations and the RAD all put together. Just, it sold this mission. The mission may be stale in gameplay loop, but it's a spectacle fight. It's like fighting Safi Jiva in Monster Hunter World. I get the same sense of emotion, like right here. The way Rusty builds up, and the crackling of the radio, and the music, and then silence. absolute, unbridled, eerie silence. And then, all for nothing, and the shot ringing out. And not just that, the worm doesn't just fall over like it does before, it stops dead in its tracks, like it had been pierced by a magic arrow, hung in the air, and it explodes and it falls down. It's such a beautiful spectacle fight, and it's such a good example of why graphics are still mostly important, because even the death explosions at the end are so vibrant, yet so grim and fitting of the color palette. And the story for this mission is so beautifully written, and the mechanics are a little stale, but it's so cool to have a weapon specific for a boss. And the ambience and voice acting are spot fucking on. Let's break onto the endings. I've ranked the endings in this order of how I think they should be completed, and the endings I wish I completed them in, and the endings I think you guys shouldn't complete them in, or at least watch them in. You guys don't have to do this, of course, but this is how I feel like I got the most out of the game. Now, if I do have a recommendation, I would swap the second ending here and the first ending, because that's how I completed it, and I feel like that added a whole different layer to it. But the first ending is the Fires of Raven ending. I'm going to call it that because that's the trophy name. So I do believe it's the Fires of Raven ending. But you're companioned with Air through the entire 2/3 of the fucking game. And you come to this point where you know you have to take Air's request and do the other ending, or follow Walter's footsteps. And I love this boss fight. It's beautiful, it's hard, it's a melee fight, and I fucking hate melee enemies because melee attacks are kind of busting the game because they're really fucking hard to dodge, but once I got a hold of it and realized you could dodge between her legs and kind of on her armpit, she could miss you, it got a bit better. But the fight is so gorgeous, and it's a heartache the whole time. For me, it was a heartache the whole time I fought Air. I love Air. Air is my favorite character in the game by a fucking country mile. Her voice acting is good. Her character is good. Her writing is good. And you want to help her. And not just that, you get this sensation of kinship, because as you play through the game, like during the Xylem mission, she mentions when you find the drone and you're going to the third EM fog screen generator, she's like, it's been a while since it's just been the two of us on the mission. Don't take too long we're not in a rush to shut down on the last EM, let's enjoy this moment. You get this sense like, maybe I can fall in love with this character. Maybe throughout this time our AC pilot and her have been together, they've started to form something more. And you start to grow attached to this character throughout the whole game. Of course, she can be a little annoying, but that's the same about any character when you play through a game and you die and have to repeat the same lines over and over again. And considering I think she is the character with the most lines in the game, it makes sense. But when you reach the phase 2 of this fight, and she changes into this fucking winged attacker drone. I think she could do it before the second phase of the fight. I only ever got her to do it around near the second phase of the fight. You get the sensation of dread, like, and when you get hit by it, oh boy, do you fucking get hit by that attack. The first time I got hit by that attack, I immediately caught PTSD from every other fucking time she did that attack for the entire goddamn fight. I am traumatized just by getting hit by it once. It's just beautiful fight design. The gameplay feels very nice. The graphics are gorgeous. The trailing of the bullets are beautiful. The slow-mo as you change through phases. The voice acting sells the fucking fight. And the waterfowl Millennia-esque inspired feel of Phase 2 gives you an overwhelming sense of unbridled dread. The way the fight evolves, you're not just fighting a single creature now, it feels like you're fighting a whole fucking army, a monster, a relic from the previous, lasers, phantoms, lasers, bolts, melee attacks that are fucking undodgeable, her clones that do melee attacks as well. there's so much layered onto this fight, and the whole time, the only thing you can focus on is, why did it have to be this way? Why did I have to portray this character that I love so much in the story? And you start to wonder, was this really the right choice? The Coral is dangerous, but did I really have to throw her aside like this? I know that she's partially Coral, but maybe I could have wiped it all out and kept her. But then, what about her friends and family that were trapped in the Coral? So you're set into this moral dilemma during the fight. Now, this may just be me, being the kind of person where I really get into the story, and I don't just like the story and play the game. I fall into the story. I put myself into the shoes, into the story, into the place. It just, when you finally shut her down at the end of this fight, it was so heartbreaking to me. Even though this was my second playthrough of the game, and because it was my second playthrough of the game, I had grown more attached to Air. But to see her fade away slowly here, I'm gonna hit you with a hot take. I loved the second season of SAO, specifically the Mother's Rosaria arc. Now, people are gonna hit me real hard for liking SAO to begin with, and even harder for liking the second season. Firstly, I like the second season more than I like the first season a lot, for a lot of reasons, mostly because Reiki had evolved his writing just overall. But because of the Mother's Rosaria arc, and specifically Yuki's death. Yuki's death holds a very, very big spot in my heart, because it's the first time I had ever, in my life, cried watching something. It's the same feeling I had when fighting Air. Now, it might not have been emotional to me, as much to me, because I hadn't grown as attached to Air as I could to Yuki throughout SAO. But it was such a heart-wrenching sensation for Yuki to die, and for me to have to take Air's life. It's that same sensation, where this character that I love so much is dying, and as opposed to Yuki, where it meant a lot more, in Air's case, I made my choice, that this was the path I had to set upon myself. And when you finish this ending, you realize, if you hadn't already, that the fires of Ibis was the Coral detonating all along. That catastrophe half a century ago was man-made, and you just recreated it. And it just puts itself perfectly together. There are ending conversations with Walter, Air, and someone else. I'm going to leave those off for you guys to explore, so you have something to hunt down after you beat the game, because I don't want to spoil too much, even though I'm giving away endings. I'm not going to give you your after credits. You can save those for yourself, like people who review movies. And you put this together, and you're like, oh, so the fires of Raven and the fires of Ibis are the Coral self-detonating. You threw away thousands of lives, and so did the previous research institute, to stop the Coral from spreading and contaminating possibly the whole fucking universe. It's a huge risk that it might fuck everything up. And so you made this choice and had to fight Air. And you're left with this sense of heroism yet villainy. You became a monster, but to save everyone. And it's a good ending. I love it. It holds a good special place in my heart because I had to betray Air the way I did, but I hated it because I had to kill Air. So now we'll move on to the second ending. I started this mission the first time in my first playthrough of the game, and went for this ending. I started this mission, I was like, there's no fucking way I just had to destroy these two engines and the whole fucking thing falls. There's gotta be more. And I destroyed the two engines, and stood there for a few minutes and nothing happened. I was so sad. I was like, there's no way the game just ends like this. There's gotta be more to it, right? And I was left dumbfounded, but even then I was still listening to the ambience, admiring the beautiful starry sky, all of it. And just out of fucking nowhere, it dropped me into a cutscene. Now, I know it's only like 20 seconds or 30 seconds between the final engine blowing up and the cutscene. Actually, it looks like it's about 5 to 10 seconds. But I was so wrapped up that when it dropped me to the cutscene, it just felt like it dropped me right back into reality. Everything sped up suddenly. It felt such like a slow, beautiful moment, and then it got really fast. Because I was like, oh, well, there's a cutscene. That's interesting. And of course there's a final cutscene, but it feels like there's more to it. And then it starts to fall, and the engine shut off. I was like, okay, maybe this is just the end, and we're going to fall to our death with the ship, or maybe we'll get off. And then, out of fucking left field, a big-ass coral laser comes out of nowhere. And again, the game once again throws me for another loop. Where I knew something had to happen because it felt empty. But I didn't expect the final fight to be Walter. Of all of the things I could have thought it would be, he was by far and away the last one. I knew immediately as soon as he said 6, 2, 1. As soon as the first vibrations of the 6 came out of his vocal cords, I knew immediately who it was and what was going on. Except I didn't. As he stands here, he's stuck and telling us that he has to complete his mission to dispose of us, and he's talking about how he's got to do the stuff for the corporation. You're like, wait, but that makes no sense. I thought you were doing this because we didn't follow your orders and we were doing the opposite of what you want. And you start to realize, oh, it's actually because he was stuffed basically into this AC as kind of a coral consciousness and controlled and manipulated, and now you're fighting the shell of him. Again, it's such a heart-wrenching fight. This character you've known the whole game, who's you thought was here, or you were here for him to do his bidding. In fact, you are here to do his bidding, and you listen to him during the fight, and he starts to realize that he could see air floating beside us, the choral voices, he could see them. And the atmosphere starts to change, and he starts to question between helping Carla and destroying the coral and doing his mission for the corporations. And then he starts to compliment us and tell us to take the credits we've made from the missions and set ourselves free from the surgery, the augmentations, and go back to just being normal. And you start to put the piece together that we aren't here for Walter. We're here for us. You just let us on as if we're here for him. And when you finally kill Walter, and that cutscene plays, and he's stuck where that split personality, where he's trying to prioritize you, Carla, and the observers to stop the coral, and the corporations. And it feels so sad, yet so meaningful, that even now, as he prepares to fire, he had to stop and contemplate that all of these versions of him are fighting one another, and in the end, he admires us, he congratulates us, tells us basically that we're free now, like as if we were the Raven itself, that they talk about for the whole game, a sense of freedom, true resolve, finding my own path. He's acknowledged that I've now found my own path and made friends. I finally had something to protect, which is why I chose the path I chose for this ending. And it wraps it up really, really nicely into this nice bow of I had to do this because Walter was no longer him, and I know that if I were in his boots, he would have done the same for me. And I wanted to help Air and see what she meant by there's possibility for the coral and humans to linger together as one and advanced humanity. And mostly, I think, in me, I wanted this ending because I loved Air so much, and I didn't want to throw her away, because it was obvious to me that if I didn't kill Carla to go down this ending, I'd have to throw her away, because this was her request, to kill Carla to get this ending, and I didn't want to get rid of Air. And so I ended up doing this ending first, and it's, of course, because it's the first ending I did, it does hold a special place in my heart, and I love it to death. And again, that sensation of kinship with Air really sells it so much. The story is so beautifully written. The way the first two endings mesh together, when you beat the game the first time, you feel good. They go through the game a second time, you unlock something called the Analysis, which gets you down the Alpha Mind ending, which gets you to a mission called MIA, which gets you to this. You fight Iguazu like 5 times throughout the game, and here you are again, right up against the same motherfucker. And not only that, you hate him so much more, because he's killed Cinder and Walter. But at the same time, you wonder why, and then All Might speaks, and you're like, wait, but why? And then Iguazu speaks, and you start to get even more confused, and then they speak as one, and you realize All Mind is not what you thought it was. It's not just a mercenaries system. It's not just the All Might Corporation. It's a being of its own, an AI. But I think there's more to it than just that. I believe that the All Might system is a representation of what the Coral is. A single conglomerated functioning of the Coral, like a hive mind, or in this case, All Might, where they all function as one incorporeal being divided by many bodies but one in mind. This fight is very good. The first phase, I beat the first phase like that was way too fucking easy. And then the cutscene starts. And then he falls down. I'm like, oh, really? That's it? That's all I had to do? And then fucking out of nowhere, like an anime where there's always a bigger motherfucker, that motherfucker shows up. It's such a good way to finish this. And not only that, we finally get to fight with Air. When you finish that ass analysis in the arena, she talks about wanting to fight beside you and wanting to learn to pilot it, and she hijacks the program to learn it. And here she is in this Ibis fighting alongside of you. And it adds such a good moment of kinship between 621 and Air, or in other words, you and Air. And the fight drags on and on and on and on, and Iguazu shuts her down, and you get separated from her, and you get this kind of sense of rage where you wanted to protect her kind of thing, and now you're fighting for her and with her, and fighting All Mind, and fighting for your own freedom, your own beliefs, and fighting Iguazu because he's starting to lose it, he's starting to fall apart. And you start to wonder, was Iguazu actually unstable all along? Was he also a Gen 4 augmented human? Because he starts to talk about hearing the voices for so long after some procedure in one of the endings, originally when you go and talk to him. And as you go through this, he starts to yell about hearing, ringing and talking and all of that. And as All Mind talks to him during this fight and tries to convince him and stuff, and Irie talks, he yells at them and tells them to stop the ringing. And he realizes Air is the one who's been hearing it all along, the voice in his head. And you start to wonder, is it just like me? Did he suffer as a Gen 4 augmented human like I did? And why? You go from hating him and despising him because he's an annoying douchebag with an overbloated confidence and ego, and for someone who disconnected you from Air during this fight, as you finally got to fight alongside her, to pitying him almost. You feel that sense of, well, pity, but also want to understand. It's just such a good way to wrap up this final ending. With Iguazu, you starting to realize that Iguazu doesn't despise you. He was always jealous of you and what you were. He wanted to know why you, as a Gen 4 augmented, were different than him, which is why I believe he was a Gen 4 augmented, because why would you ask that if you aren't as well? Now, I'll admit it, I got cocky during this fight when I recorded it originally, and I had to record this twice. In fact, that opening cutscene was recorded from the first recording, and I cut it out of that first recording, put it into this second recording where you're seeing me fight now, because I got cocky in the first recording, and decided to dispose of all of my weapons and try to finish him by punching him in the fucking face, and he died. It was really sad, because I thought it would be really cool. But this fight is truly the pinnacle, I think, of all of the bosses in the game. As much as I love the Ice Worm and its cool ambience, it's a stale fight. As much as I like Air, it's a painful fight. But in the end, it lacks that good feel of an ending, that overwhelming accomplishment. Of course, it feels good. I like the ending. The same thing with the Walter ending, where I felt like I didn't want this to happen. Here we go. I'm gonna purge all my weapons real quick and then punch this motherfucker in the face and try to wake him up. But it's just that you, with the Walter ending, you feel like there are too many uncertainties to all of this, and you aren't happy with the way it ended, and there's just too much unknown. Of course, you want to trust Air and have her stay by your side and stay by her side all the time, but there's too many uncertainties. And then you get to this All Mind ending, the Alla Lecta S ending. I know I didn't say it at the end, but I wanted to say it now. This ending is the best ending in the game, in my opinion. The absolutely stunning way this transpires. I'm gonna talk a little bit while this is going, and I gotta get to the outro here pretty quickly. But the black hole, the build up to the black hole, the ambience cut, then the implosion, and then the way the ambience all cut out, and then suddenly the big red black hole shines out, and the coral seeps across the galaxy through the stars you see, and everything just builds up, and you and Irie have this beautiful moment of victory. And this fucking black hole reminds me, I've never watched all of Evangelion, but it reminds me of the final impact I think it's the end of the anime, but it's what it looks like to me. It's just this beautiful kinship feeling, as you almost as if you and Irie had become one. And again, I love Air throughout the whole damn game, and this gave me such joy to like. It's like I finally went to rest with her, almost. Like, just it felt good. And then it went to black, and I assumed the credits would pop up, and then a final cutscene plays where they talk about how we'd been disseminated across the stars and that we're all one, part of the next step. And you start to think, well, why didn't they just leave me in my AC? It's because we're no longer a human. We're part of the coral, planted into another machine somewhere amongst the thousands of stars in the universe. And it's such a beautiful ending. All in all, let me summarize it one last time as we get ready to hear my favorite line of the game. Absolutely stunning graphics. The gameplay is absolutely replayable for about 100 hours, which is a lot more to say than most games now. The story is super well written. I loved every second of this story. I had so many questions answered and found new questions over and over again. And the endings were absolutely astounding. And with that being said, everybody, I'm sorry this was long, and I do hope all of you lovely gents, gentlemen, a beautiful, enjoy, and I'll see all of you lovely, lovely AC pilots again next time. And with that being said, Air, hit him with it.
Main system, activating combat mode.
Now, of course, this video isn't over. I had to give you guys one nice little chill at the end. I want to give you my general summarization and wrap things up into a nice, pretty bow, because I feel like I left it a little in the air. The game is an absolute blast. I said this on stream when I beat the game for the third time. The game, to me, on a scale of 1 to 10, is absolutely a 15. Now, don't take that too far and get all angry at me because you disagree, but there's so much going for this game, and I said in the past in the video that I wanted to do nostalgia type content, and this game absolutely wraps that up beautifully. It gave me so much nostalgia because it got all of the good story aspects, all of the good mission aspects from older games that I enjoyed so much into a beautiful game. This game to me is worth every fucking penny it costs. If you want to buy it if you see it on sale, grab it in a fucking heartbeat. Don't ever miss the chance to play this game. If you want to buy a full price, I would suggest it, honestly. It's worth the full price tag. Hell, I'd almost argue it's worth the deluxe edition price tag. If it weren't for the fact that the deluxe edition doesn't really add too much to it, so it's not really all that worth to buy a deluxe edition as opposed to the normal version. So, this game, to me, it is absolutely getting my Game of the Year vote. 100% when that rolls around, this is my vote. I know that's bold for me to say without having played Baldur's Gate. I don't care. I'm looking forward to playing that too, but I don't think I'll enjoy it as much as I did this. Like I said, I do hope all of you lovely people did enjoy, and I'll see all of you wonderful, wonderful AC pilots next time when I play whatever I play next. With that being said, Air, do you want to take us away one last time, together, the two of us? Main system activating combat mode.